the secret to my success, I would say, is who you surround yourself with. The leaders that you surround yourself with, my board of directors and my staff. That's my secret, to get great people around you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Framework Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Engel, president of Southeastern University. Of course, joining me as our co-host, Michael Steiner, SCU Vice President of Advancement and Innovation, Senior Vice President. And we're grateful for his leadership and excited today for our show's guest, Steve Scruggs. Steve, thanks for being with us today, man. What an honor.
Wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Well, Steve has been at the helm of the Lakeland Economic Development Council for over 37 years, guiding Lakeland through incredible growth and transformation, from creating jobs to, fostering innovation and improving community life. His leadership you've made a profound impact on Central Florida, on this whole community. And we're so grateful to be able to have a chance to have a conversation.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, for those of you who don't know much about the Lakeland Economic Development Council, it's a private nonprofit organization with over, about 140 members?
Correct.
And companies. And so I want to start our conversation by talking about the LADC and your role and how it's shaping our community and just making this place a better place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did mention that we're a nonprofit, that we have 140 members. Our budget's about $1.3 million, and 98% of that is from private companies or organizations like Southeastern, which is very unusual in the economic development business. Most get a lot of public dollars, government, dollars, either from a county or a city or whatever. We're the only one in the state that's like that, and it makes us kind of unique. We're able to do things that other economic development councils aren't able to, and we can talk about some of those things. But generally speaking, most economic development councils are just trying to get new companies to move to their area and have existing companies expand. Because of our success in that, and because we're private, we're able to also kind of work on the things behind the scenes that make a great city and try to build that infrastructure. And we're not talking about infrastructure like road, sewer, and water. We're talking about talent. We're talking about third spaces in your community. We're talking about entrepreneurs. And so we can talk about some of those things as we go, but we've had the chance to create and spin off a lot of things that are infrastructure for our community that make it a great place to work, play, and live.
Yeah. Now, as you look back over your time here, what was the economic climate like in Lakeland when you first started, and what motivated you as you stepped into this role and began to lead and guide? I mean, your position at a place to see the entire city evolve and continue to grow. And so looking back over all these years, what role did LEDC play in shaping the transformation of the city?
Wow. I have not been asked that in a long time, and that'll be fun. So let's see if I can do this. In 1987, 86, 87 time period, Lakeland had a 20% unemployment rate. And the reason it had a 20% unemployment rate is because the citrus industry had experienced 3 freezes in 1983, 85, and 89. And that was crippling because that was one of the top 3 industries in our area. The phosphate industry also had been, all the engineers from this area, there were 1,000 engineers in Lakeland that worked for a company called Davy McKee. In 1985, they shut down. So that was 1,000 people out, and they were all the ones building phosphate plants around the world. Well, those phosphate plants around the world started competing with the phosphate plants here, and so we went, and they went into a recession, and so at one point we had 25 phosphate companies in the Lakeland urban area, and today we have 1.
Wow.
So, and that was the beginning of the decline in the industry, and it moving out of Polk County and overseas and south. The third thing that happened was Piper Aircraft had over 2,000 employees in Lakeland, and they shut their plant down in 1985.
Wow.
So you can think of all the spinoff industries that supported that. So between those 3 things, that's kind of what got us to 20% unemployment. And we were really, of all the counties in the state of Florida of 67, we were the least diversified from an industry standpoint of any other county in the entire state of Florida. So really, it was citrus, phosphate, and some tourism because of, back in the day, Cypress Gardens and Winter Haven.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which is now Legoland,
Right,
but at the time. And so those were our 3 industries, and 2 of those went in the tank. And so that's the environment that I came into as the economic development, person here in Lakeland. And the first thing that we did is we saw all those orange groves that were burnt out along I-4. That's about how far the freeze came down, a little bit further than that, those freezes. Everything kind of south of Highway 60 survived because of the temperature changes. So that's where the citrus industry moved. But you had a lot of land on I-4 that wasn't getting used. And we thought, what should we do? Well, we're in between 5 or 6 million people. Maybe we start recruiting warehouses here, distribution centers. And that's kind of how it started. And our first big win was in 1987. Pepperidge Farm put a plant in Lakeland out on I-4 in a burnt out orange grove.
Wow.
They're still here, but that was the first deal that kind of turned it for us.
And now, I mean, going from there over I think in the last 5 years, now we have Amazon that moved in and also doing distribution. Tell us a little bit about what it takes to create a strategy that's measured in decades like that, like you guys think that. What it goes into that, how do you work it, and how do you keep it moving and keep that momentum?
Yeah, and I think the first thing that I would say is you do have to look at your labor market and see what, who's educated and how educated they are, and, do you have the skill sets to recruit the kind of companies that, have the employees that can work in those companies. So back in the day, we had these people, all these people were in the citrus industry. And so we had to find jobs for people at that skill level. And that's why distribution made sense. But that isn't where we wanted to stay. I mean, we wanted to obviously start attracting more high skill, high wage jobs. And so, but we had to build a base first. And so we did with the distribution. And once the distribution came, it made a lot of sense for us to then take it to the next level and get manufacturing. And we already had some manufacturing, but like the Pepperidge Farm Bakery. Today we have 5 very large bakeries here. So it's not just Pepperidge Farm, it's Buttercrust Bakery, or it's Chadrines that moved here from Puerto Rico 5 years ago. Or, Mission Foods has a big facility here. So we started attracting manufacturing here. Yeah. And so then that was a different skill level. That kind of upgraded you from a distribution job to a higher paid job in manufacturing. The final step for us was then, hey, can we get some white collar jobs that aren't just healthcare? And we started, Publix was a big win for us to be here, but could we get other companies to move here? And so then Lockheed Martin moved here with 400 or 500 white collar jobs, and then Geico moved here with 3,500. And so we started seeing some success in attracting more higher pay, white collar type jobs. But again, Polk County and Lakeland, one of the things that we began to realize is we were bumping up against a wall with regards to our education level. And so our K through 12 really needed improvement. And the reason it did is because we were attracting presidents of companies down here, and they're like, your schools. Right, yeah. I don't know if I want to put my kids in your school or whatever. Right. And so that's one of the things we can talk about later that we created, but a foundation that would help public schools get better that started as Lakeland Leads, and today it's called Connect Ed Polk.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about it. So what was the point of that? I mean, how does it work? How does it kind of go, and how does it serve this need?
Sure. So as we were hearing these rumors from companies, we decided to meet with our top 20 employers, and we sat down with them and we said, how can we make a difference here? And one of the things said, why don't you ask our employees? We've got a lot of people here that work here that live in Brandon, or they live in Tampa or Orlando because they wouldn't move here to put their kids in the schools, or because we didn't have the amenities that they wanted, or sports or airports or things that were so we were able to get 93 surveys filled out by corporate executives that work for companies in the Lakeland area, detailed of why they didn't move here. It was 93 of them that were commuting in. Education, public education, K through 12 was number one reason they wouldn't move here. So that's when we decided to do a deep dive into our public education system. It wasn't very popular. I spoke about it at city commission retreat one year, and I was on the front page of the paper saying our public school system isn't too good. And I think every teacher in Polk County called me the next day and said, "We do a great job." But what was funny about it is, you know, like I'd go to the Palace Pizza where I see Michael occasionally with his brood, and people would grab my elbow and they'd just say real quietly,
"Yeah,
I really like that you did that. But don't tell anybody else." You know, because I don't want anybody getting mad at me. That was the beginning of our leadership at the Lakeland Economic Development Council saying we need to do something. And so we got leaders together. We did this deep dive PowerPoint that basically showed that our public education system was segregated and it had an access issue. And so, you know, just if you move here from somewhere else and you have a 4th grader and a 6th grader or an 8th grader, you know, and you're a doctor at the Watson Clinic, you're looking for an A-rated school. Well, almost all the A-rated schools back then were magnet schools or they were charters. And so that's how the segregation kind of happened. We did it for a good reason. Charters and magnets were a good reason, but then what happened is it wound up, it just created a segregated environment. And then secondly, there weren't enough seats. So if you want to go to McKeel, get in line behind 3,000 people.
Good luck.
You know, so that's the access issue. And so we created Lakeland Leads and got a lot of people together to put money in, to hire an executive director, to start saying what are best practices around the country and how can we get behind our superintendent and get a school board that's proactive and how do we make this thing great. And we've had a lot of success over the last 5 years. Fred Hyde's doing a fantastic job.
We had him on the show here a few weeks ago.
So there's been some, I would say not incremental change. I would say super fast forward change. And maybe Lakeland Leads has had a little piece or part of that. And of course, they're supporting a lot of things now that are going to make the system better and raising money from the private. So I think maybe the success of it was bringing the business community
into it
and saying, how can we help? And here's our resources. Let's get it. And electing the right people and all that kind of stuff.
But getting them involved in a healthy way. I think sometimes, you know, business communities, they want to come in and they want to, you know, like you said, start a charter school, start a magnet school. How can we start turning a profit? But what's cool about Lakeland Leads is it harnesses that energy and says, okay, where does it actually help? Not just like what your ideas are. And I feel like that's been what LEDC has been for the city for a long time.
Well, we see a need and we move into it if somebody else isn't there, I guess.
That's what I love about it.
And then I'd say the second thing would be, and we can talk about some of these other things, but we don't own them. We're not trying to build a kingdom. So if it's Lakeland Leads, we get it started, we fund it, we hire people, and then we spin it out. And the same thing with Catapult. You know, it's an independent organization that has a person that was an intern that you interviewed recently, Kristen Strawbridge, who's now 30 years old, and she's the president of a multi-million-dollar, you know, entity in downtown Lakeland. She's got more people that answer her than me, and a bigger budget than I have. She's 30 years old and a Southeastern grad.
And you have over the last it's been the last decade you've been creating Catapult. Why is it? What do you think Catapult contributes in a way that's critical to Lakeland's growth?
So good question. I think number one would be entrepreneurs don't have to leave here to do something. I mean, we've created a space for them, and we've funded them, and we've subsidized them, and I think people sometimes when you think entrepreneurs and whatever, it's a bunch of kids down there that are, 23 years old. The average age is 41, I think, at Catapult. Wow. So it's for everybody in the community, not just somebody graduating from school or whatever. So I think first of all, Dr. Engel, number one would be we've given them a place. Yeah. Number two, we're funding them. Number three, we're doing it at a cost where they don't have to mortgage their house or something. Mm-hmm. And I think also, though, it just sends a message to the community that its leaders want to invest in them. Right. And that's not something that you necessarily get everywhere. Mm-hmm. And you go to other cities, and we've traveled all over the country, and there's a lot of cities that aren't growing. There's a lot of cities that are retracting, and everybody wants to move to Florida. So I would say for us, we want to make sure that we provide a place that people can start something here without going bankrupt or mortgaging their future. And honestly, also, a lot of times, I'm sure you talked about with Kristen, you have, it's good to have a few hundred people that come in and think they have a good idea and stop them before they
mortgage their home, before they go from there.
So I think that's good too. But I would say, just that building alone, bringing people to downtown Lakeland, even for us, the LEDC has its office there. Yep. You bring people into that building, they're like, wow. That's a gorgeous facility. They're like, wow, Lakeland's got something like this. And, to have a maker space and a kitchen and the co-working, it's unique. There's just nothing like it in the country.
Yeah. What are some of the companies that have come out of there?
Wow. Well, the number one, and again, I don't want to repeat your podcast with Kristen, but I'd say, the most famous one in Lakeland is Born and Bred. It was really one of the first ones that came out. So I think Jen Smurr and that's a whole story that we can do on another podcast. Maybe we get her on here at some point.
Yeah,
she's really.
That would be a great.
I think that'd be a good one to have. But yeah, and she's a real example of one of the things that we thought of with Catapult was creating more third spaces in Lakeland. So if you're a student at Southeastern University and you've explored the campus, as much as you can, and it's beautiful here, but you guys always encourage people to get involved in the community and come downtown and experience the community. And so for us, we want to create third spaces, not just for Southeastern students, but for our whole community. Third spaces are places that, are in between your home and work. Yeah. And places that you want to go and places that you want to experience. So whether it's the Joinery or whether it's Born and Bred or, those types of Concord Coffee or whatever it is, we want more of those spaces because that attracts not only students, but high skill, high wage people want to experience those. And it makes your community sticky, and it makes it a place that you want to stay and live in and grow, and it's really authentic when it's local, and it's not a chain, and there's nothing wrong with chains, but we there's something about young people today. They want to experience local, It means something to them.
Well, and we were in a meeting, I think, with one of the investors here in town, and they were talking about how their hope is that they use the term that Lakeland doesn't become a bedroom community, that we've been pushing hard because of the location. It could be so easy, and sometimes you see people lump us in, we're Orlando or we're Tampa, but we're not. Tell us a little bit about that tension, and what does it take for us to really cultivate our own identity so we don't end up as a bedroom community?
Wow, that is like a question I would have mailed into you to say, please ask me that question. Good job, Michael. That's the bane of my existence. We do not want to be a bedroom community because what that really means is you don't have a place for your people to work, and you don't have a place for that's the number one thing. It's not as much the third space, but I would say, so then people have to commute to go find a job that's at their level. And that goes back to the discussion we were having earlier where we only had phosphate and citrus. And so that was the only kind of jobs that we had. So there was a whole segment of the workforce population that wasn't being served. If you graduated from school, you weren't going to come back if you weren't in those industries. So that's why we started with distribution, and then we went to manufacturing, then we went to office, then we went to high skill, because we want to create a community where your right now children go to college and then either they go to Southeastern and stay here, or they go somewhere else and come back here. And so we want everybody's child to have an opportunity. And so if you that's why we built this ecosystem the way that we have. And so being a bedroom community is kind of like Brandon. Brandon's a good example. There's no downtown. There's no sense of place. all of those people go work in Tampa or Lakeland or something. And nothing against Brandon. No. We love Brandon, but it's the same thing that's happening up in the Northeast Polk County, the Davenport.
Right.
There's just not a real, there's no sense of downtown community.
Right. It's all these things are popping up. If you've been in Davenport, I've been recently. It's cool. They're getting new stuff.
Yes.
But it's all so disconnected.
Right.
And you don't know. Yeah.
And there's no density. There's no
right.
Yeah. So we don't. So that's why it's so important to have an economic development council, because you want to recruit companies here, and you want to make so you're creating jobs in your community that people don't have to commute somewhere else to get a job.
Yep.
And then you also want to make sure that the ones you have stay and keep investing here.
Yeah.
Right.
Because like a Pepperidge Farm, for instance, they have 8 manufacturing plants around the country. They can decide where they want to put their next goldfish line. They can decide where they're going to put their next cookie line.
Yeah.
We want it to be in Lakeland.
Right here,
Publix is the same way. They have dairy plants in other locations. They have, ice cream plants, and we want them to expand in Lakeland, not at one of their other facilities. So it's important for us, to have I'd say a attractive place to invest in.
Yeah. So good. A couple of questions that you can kind of tie back to back. You are a leader who oozes with vision, passionate vision, and a good leader who is strong visionary also leads by understanding context, auditing the context. How do you stay so adaptable in really an ever-changing economic landscape? Because it constantly changes. Do you have a process in a way that helps you to make sure that you're meeting the issues, the challenges, the needs that are there to, again, make this a community an incredible place to be?
Wow, another question I would have sent in. So
we pay attention at those meetings, Steve.
I
know you think I don't. I'm there. I see it. I take my notes.
I know. I have about 3 ways I'd like to answer that, but I would say the first one that really makes sense is city visits.
Yeah.
So, going to, in which Sylvia's been with us on a number, and thank you for having her be part of that and being part of our high skill efforts. So that whole group of high skill, high wage investors, their whole mission is to go to other cities, see what they're doing, bring those ideas back, Lakelify them, and then implement them. And so, Catapult was one of those. Why Lakeland was one of those. The LAL really came from our Greenville trip. We brought back, I think, 25 different things that we've implemented in our community. So how do you stay on the edge, or how do you stay relevant? You go see what other people are doing. And so for us, whether that was San Francisco or San Diego or Austin or the Research Triangle Park or Nashville or whatever, we try to go to those cutting edge places that we think are a little ahead of us and learn from them and spend 4 days there and meet with 50 different community leaders and then bring those ideas back.
Right. And even though things change rapidly in the mindset, what does it take to think in decades and not get impatient with just current projects, so that you really are seeing the bigger picture way down the road?
I think from a leadership perspective, people have to believe in you. And you've been here now. How many years have you been at Southeastern?
It's my 14th year.
Yeah. So, I mean, how often does that happen? That when you're somewhere that long, you really can affect change.
Sure.
Right.
And you do have to look at, kind of the long-term planning process, and you always have to iterate and adjust as you go. But for me, this is my 38th year here. I mean, at some point, you're keeping your eye on the ball today, but you're always looking at what the next thing is and where you're going. And I think maybe past success gives you the opportunity to go out and try and be a little bit more risky and try things as a CEO or running an organization. And so maybe the things that you bring up, or the people that you bring in on your team after 14 years is a little bit different than it is after the first year or two.
Right.
It really is. And so you have more kind of rope. People trust you more. They give you more opportunity. And so you have to take that and you got to run with it. And it's okay to fail. But in small increments.
Right.
We don't want to, like go out and start some huge project and spend, millions of dollars, and then it crashes. You want to test the concept out. And we kind of learned that from IDEO out in San Francisco on one of our city visits. And it's been extremely helpful. Catapult was one of those. We came back and Wesley Beck said, "Hey, I'll give you the basement of the bank building for a few years for free."
Yeah.
And we tested it. And then we built, a $15 or $20 million facility. So I think, anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts on that.
And as you're thinking, you're looking over your career, you started coming out of an economic crisis. You helped lead the city through the 2008 crisis, then through the COVID crisis, and you've been this kind of stability of leadership in our community through all of this. What advice would you give to the next generation of leaders that's coming up into the city, that's going to kind of build on this legacy that you've built? What are some of the things you're telling us that we need to be thinking about going forward?
I think, and again, probably true here for Dr. Engel, but for me, and what the secret to my success, I would say, is who you surround yourself with. The leaders that you surround yourself with, my board of directors and my staff. That's my secret, to get great people around you. That would be the advice I would give people. You really need to surround yourself with. And don't be scared of hiring people that are smarter than you, that all those things. And so for me, that's just, maybe I'm a good connector, but I've been around for 38 years. I kind of know who's got this information, who's got that, and putting them together. And that's kind of maybe my gift. But I wouldn't have that if I didn't have great people around me. And so I've just always had extremely good leadership.
Wow.
Above and with.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's critical. My first. There's other things, but for me, that's by far my number one.
Love it.
Well, hey, Steve, thank you for joining us on the podcast, man. Great to have this conversation, and just grateful for you and what you've done to shape our community, to shape Central Florida. You're an amazing leader, and grateful for your voice. And I know SCU is committed to serving every way possible. I know our students, when they come to Lakeland, they fall in love with this community. And quite honestly, a lot of them stay. And, they're working in all different industries. You mentioned Lockheed, they hire a lot of our students. Our education majors end up teaching here in the Polk County system. And, so we have a lot of people that stay, and we're just grateful because of what you've done and all the things you've touched.
Well, thank you for your leadership. We love Southeastern. We love being able to take advantage of hiring the students that are coming out here. We love giving them internships, and we love that you lead from a place of serving, which again, if you really asked me what the number one reason for my success is, it's because of Jesus. Okay. My faith. That's it. So, you want to throw that one on the table.
I love it.
I'd kind of like to go on record saying that's why I've been in Lakeland for 38 years. And so y'all lead with that and lead with that. And so for me, I'm going to keep walking through the parking lot, picking up the paper, on the ground, and cleaning the toilet when I see a mess, and you guys do all that. You wash all of our feet, and it's right out there in the statue.
Right.
Your little statue there. And so, just keep serving, and God will bless you.
Love it.
Amen. Well said. Well said.
Thank you for your time today. And if you want to stay up to date with Steve and the Lakeland Economic Development Council, you can check out lakelandedc.com. That's lakelandedc.com. Check them out on Instagram, social media, across the board. LAL is another great resource. I love subscribing to it. And so lots of incredible things happening in the city. So thank you so much for listening to Framework Leadership.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Framework Leadership. If you're watching on YouTube, now would be a great time to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can get incredible leadership content right to your YouTube feed. You can also check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every single week, Framework Leadership. And if you love great email newsletters, and I know I do, make sure you check out kenengel.com and subscribe to the Framework Leadership newsletter. It's an incredible piece of content we put out every single week of amazing leadership resources right to your inbox. Make sure you check it out. You can also follow us on Instagram at Kent_Engel, at Dr. Michael Steiner, on X at Kent Engel, and on Facebook at Kent.Engel. Stay up to date on all the incredible things happening on the podcast and at Southeastern University. We love you guys. guys, and we love our followers and our subscribers. Thank you so much for listening to the Framework Leadership Podcast.